Sarah Brubaker of Novice Cosplay, and I am talking about how I made Padme Amidala's senatorial dress from Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. And today I'm going to talk about the base layer, which is the bodice and skirt. The most difficult part about this layer is all of the hand embroidery. So here along the collar line, along the sleeves, and along the central panel of the skirt, everything had to be hand embroidered. I would not have been able to do the embroidery without this incredible pattern from Last Pot Brewed on Etsy. It's a very reasonable price for a fantastic pattern, and I loved working with it. The bodice has several separate components, starting with the sequined panel that goes in the center front, an embroidered panel that goes directly underneath it, a pointed hemline, embroidered sleeves, and then what I call the emo sleeves underneath. These are some incredible reference images that came from when this costume was on display at several museums. You can find these and more photos on the Padawan's Guide website, and you can see the separate components of this underlayer. This reference photo comes from the book Star Wars Fit for a Queen, and it is an up-close look at the corded embroidery that is on the center front skirt panel. This is the same style of embroidery that you can find all over the entire outfit, and you can see that the cord matches the fabric underneath and has silver detailed stitching. Mine did come out a little bit differently, and I'll talk about how that turned out. In order to complete the embroidery, I got what is called rat tail trim off of Amazon. I used the entirety of one spool and then went on to a second, which is also because I was using it for the piping between the panels on the surcoat. I used a couching stitch to put this onto the under fabric. This was the closest I could get to a color match. It definitely does not match the fabric that is underneath, but it is in the right color scheme and is close to the velvet that I used for the jacket. The reason I used this is because the next closest thing I could find was this bright purple that really clashed and did not go with the color scheme at all. Allow me to take you on a little tour of this base layer. So the bodice is constructed of some princess seams that go straight down with a narrow point here where they connect to this uniquely shaped central panel here. We have our sequined panel, we have a pointed end here, we have the hooks where the jacket attaches to. The sleeves each have a couple panels. We have two panels at the front where the embroidery is, and then we have a plain panel in the back. So these are essentially split down the middle. Ideally, my shoulders would match my shoulders, but that's not what happened. So we have this embroidery going down here, and then just a plain single piece for the back. This is what my bodice pieces looked like before they were completely assembled, and you can see the different panels both on the sleeves and on the bodice, with the embroidery going on the two left panels on that sleeve and then on that center panel that goes right underneath the sequined layer on the bodice. And here are some progress photos from when I was doing the embroidery. This is the sleeve embroidery, and you can see the difference between the single and double layer of rat tail trim between the two halves of the sleeve as I was working. So you go through the entire embroidery layout once, and then you double the whole thing up with a second layer of rat tail trim in one continuous cord. And then we go down the skirt, and we have this very long embroidered panel here. The skirt itself is just a simple circle skirt, and this embroidered panel is what took most of the time and effort for the base layer. So here is an up-close look of the embroidery. And this is also where most of the weight of the skirt comes from. This panel is quite dense and heavy, so when I wear my hoop skirt underneath, I actually kept the top half of my panel when I made it. So I sewed it into the waistband of my skirt, but then I actually tucked this into the waistband of my hoop skirt that I wear underneath. So I do have a crinoline, and when I tuck this portion into the hoop skirt waistband, it helps pull this up, because otherwise the problem is the weight of this panel just drags down, and then I was having a problem with this dragging on the ground and getting damaged. You'll also notice that I have this pin here, and I hook this around my hanger to again pull this weight up when I'm hanging it as well, because the weight of it was pulling it off of my clothes hanger. Here's another view of the front of the bodice. This was the hardest piece to pattern as far as the garment construction goes, because this funky point here in the middle, as you can see, I still didn't quite get it pressed out completely smooth. But this point here, getting the patterns to match up was the trickiest. And of course, this is visible, whereas much of this is not because it's hidden by the jacket. I spent about 60 hours taking this rat tail trim and couching it, and you can see my threads here where I was tacking it as I went. So I decided to use threads that matched my base fabric. In this lighting, it looks almost gray, silvery, but it is still definitely a lavender color, and it's just a synthetic satin. I will point out the one mistake I made when patterning my sleeves, which I didn't realize, of course, until I was already done with the embroidery, which was that technically each of these panels is longer on one side. See how this is short and this is long? They're supposed to match short sides in the middle so that the cuff has a natural curve like that. But I had already sewn them onto my pattern pieces where my shoulder curve was. So it wasn't just a matter of swapping the two pieces. So I could not just interchange the two embroidery pieces I had done on each sleeve in order to get that cuff to match up correctly. So the effect is still there. I still love how it looks. I'm very proud of this, but I did not realize my mistake until I was already done. As you can see, the back of the underlayer is extremely plain because it is entirely covered by the jacket of this costume, but this is what it looks like for those who are curious. The last part of the underlayer to discuss are what I call the emo sleeves. So these go underneath the sleeves that is on the bodice, and I just made these little stretchy glove-like garments that just have some elastic at the top, go right up to where my elbow is, but then they go just up to the base of my fingers so that they poke up underneath the sleeves. So you can see why I call them my emo sleeves, but they stay up pretty well, just with a little bit of elastic here, and they have kind of this hourglass shape. This fabric is a little bit stretchy, but honestly, that's not what really does it. I just have enough space here for my wrist to have movement. And then I just have a little hem there at the top for my fingers. And there you have it. That's how I made the base layer, the bodice and skirt for Padme's outfit from Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Here's the finished look, and check out the other videos on how I made the other components of this costume. I'm Sarah of Novice Cosplay, and thank you for watching.